Hey book friends, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to my favorite books of 2022. You guys, this is my favorite video to film. This is my favorite video to prep for. I feel like you prep for it almost all year long, thinking like, is this gonna be a favorite? Is this gonna be a favorite? I have some really good ones to share with you today, and I'm so excited to share them. So let's just start chatting about my favorite books for 2022. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to the channel if you're new here, or welcome back if you've been coming for a while. And so if you've been on my channel for a while, you know some of my favorites because I've been talking about them so much this year. But I'm excited to share them all with you today. So I ended up with 10 books. There's a couple that are series, and I'm counting those as one, but I have 10 to share with you today. And I didn't rank them other than the top 3. There are a clear top 1, 2, and 3 for my year, and I will share those as I get going. But the first handful, for 7 or so, are just in no particular order. I just really enjoy them. They're all 5-star reads. So let's hop in. The first one I want to share with you is Dark Matter. So I finally read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I feel like it's a very popular book. A lot of people just rave about it, and I get it. I understand. I really enjoyed it. It is this like thriller science fiction type book, which I love that combo of a thriller science fiction. It's about this man who was abducted, but then he wakes up and things are a bit strange and he's not sure what's going on. He's not sure why it feels like his friends don't know him, his wife's not there, things like that. And so he has to start figuring it out. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to ruin the ride, because I really knew nothing about this book when I went into it. And I enjoyed it all. I feel like it definitely has science involved, some like physics and things like that. But I feel like it's very readable. It's very approachable for those who don't understand this kind of science very well, which I'm one of those. Physics is not my thing. But yet I really enjoyed thinking about the concepts behind this book and how things were working. So anyway, Blake Crouch, Dark Matter, loved it. I really enjoyed this book this year. Okay, here's a book I read like in January or something. And it is very much not a typical book for me, but I loved it. So I read this book, Someone I Used to Know by Paige Toon. You guys, this is like a contemporary book, not usually what I pick up, but I felt like the characters in this book, I just cared so much about them. So the main character, her name is Leah, and she is part of a family where her parents foster. So she's actually the only biological child in their revolving family of foster brothers and sisters. And so that comes with challenges. And this story is kind of told in 2 timelines, like when she was younger, like 15-ish, around the time when a foster brother named George starts coming to live with them. And he is just troubled and has some hard things going on. But she becomes his friend along with the boy kind of down the lane. And they form this just really tight friendship as children. But then some things have happened to their adult selves. And some stuff is going on. And it's very hard things. But you don't quite know what happened. And as the story is working its way through, you learn a lot of things. And I was so invested in their characters. I just felt for her, Leah, as she is older and has a child, as well as the 15-year-old Leah. She's just trying to figure out life. I just really like the representation of the foster system, of the sacrifice it takes to be a foster family, but the rewards are so big. And so it was a very inspirational book in that way, as well as just a good, well-crafted story. So I really enjoyed this one. All right, to move on to a trilogy that I just loved, that I feel like no one will be surprised that I am talking about in my favorite books of 2022. And that is the Inheritance Game trilogy. I loved this set of books. Even though it's YA, even though there's a little angsty romance kind of things going on, I still loved this. I thought it was a very clever book. And so the first one, Inheritance Games, and it's all by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is about a girl named Avery who is down on her luck. Her mom has passed away. She's pretty much on her own, living out of her car, living with her sister. Things are hard until one day she hears that she has inherited something from this really unusual billionaire who lived in like Texas or something like that. And so she goes to the reading of the will expecting like a small amount of money for some reason from this guy she doesn't know, to only find out that he has given her his entire estate. He has hopped over his children, his grandchildren, in order to award her his fortune, really. But there's a couple stipulations. She has to live in the house for a year. She has to live there with his grandsons, and there's 4 of them. A couple of them are about her age, hence the romance involved in this story. But what I loved about these books is the puzzles, the mysteries. Like, first off, why was she chosen to inherit all this money? But also the fact that this house, the Hawthorne mansion, as well as this man, were really interesting. Like, he liked to set up all these puzzles and riddles and games for his grandchildren to solve and to compete against each other. And there was like secret passageways and secret messages in the paintings, things like that. It was just really fun. It reminded me initially of like a Knives Out in book form, but then it still had this rest of the books to kind of fully flesh out what's going on. And I enjoyed the whole ride. Honestly, I enjoyed the whole thing. So I highly recommend these, especially if you're able to look past some of the angsty romance stuff. It's just such a good read. So these books. Okay. Another one that I just loved. I loved this Agatha Christie book. So I've been trying to read more Agatha Christie. I feel like I'm averaging about 1 a quarter or something like that, but I'm enjoying them. And this one probably was my standout from the year, although I did just finish one that was also very good, Peril at End House, but I'm still going to stick with this one as a favorite for the year. So it's called Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. And I read it because there was a movie coming out, but I still haven't seen the movie. I just really enjoyed the book. And it's about this group of people on this boat, basically on the Nile in the 30s or something like that. And Hercule Poirot is on the boat, and he's the famous detective. And then what happens is that there's this very well-to-do woman who is found murdered on the boat, and he has to kind of work out what's going on. I did feel like there was a fairly large cast of characters on this boat, which added to the confusion of like, who did this? How did this actually happen? But I really enjoyed how things played out. So then you're like, well, this happened in the lounge or something like that, and so wasn't there, but so was there. And so you're trying to kind of work it out in your head. And there was so many twists and turns, and it was just a really fun reveal in the end that I definitely didn't predict. I have yet to predict or solve an Agatha Christie. But that does not negate the enjoyment of these books, because I feel like the clues are there. By the time you get to the end, you're like, oh, I see all those little nuggets throughout the book. And so, yes, her books are fantastic. And another book that is a favorite from this year that I just finished, I'm so excited to continue with the series, is this book. And so it's The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons. So this is a book that surprised me. I did not think I was going to like it as much as I did. It is definitely a kind of epic high fantasy book where there's 5 books in the series. I think it's called The Chorus of Dragons. And it's about this man named Kieran. And you start the book out learning that Kieran is in jail. We don't know why he's in jail, but basically it takes the book to explain that. So there's this other person / monster in there with him that's like, tell me a story of your life. And he doesn't really want to, but she coerces him into it. And then he starts to tell the story, and then she interrupts and is like, well, you need to go back further. So basically she starts telling his story as well. So you have 2 timelines. They're about like a year or 2 apart, but you're learning about Kieran as he's growing up in this city, and you're learning what's happening to him and why and how he gets to where he's at by the end of it, because it says here that he has been found to be the missing son of a treasonous prince, and where it goes from there. And I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the characters. I really appreciated Kieran's story. I appreciate all that is left undone that I don't totally understand, that I feel like I will eventually understand, and I'm looking forward to finding out. I feel like that's really why this is on the favorites, because I'm so excited to hear more about this story. So anyway, Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons. Favorite. All right, I have a couple more before I get to my top 3. All right, so I read this book also kind of early in 2022. Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. Historical fiction book, World War II book. I really liked it. I liked the 3 perspectives. It's told from the perspective of 3 different women around the time of World War II, but they're very different. One is a young Polish teenager who eventually gets taken into a concentration camp, as well as a German doctor who is in charge of one of the concentration camps, and then a U.S. socialite, which her perspective I didn't really appreciate at first, but it definitely plays into when you get to the end of this book. And this book really focuses in on the tragedies of a specific concentration camp, the women's concentration camp, and what was done there, some of the experiments that were done to these women, some of the just atrocities that were performed on them, and their just spirit and how they were able to withstand things and stay strong for each other. And that was just beautiful. They were called the rabbits, if I remember right. And then the sociolite plays a part in their story as well. I just don't want to say too much, just so that you can enjoy the book if you haven't read it already. But I really loved Lilac Girls. I feel like it's not a new book, but I loved it. And then another one that I read fairly recently is The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. Oh, you guys, this is such a fun book. Now, I am not a huge Jane Austen fan. Like, I don't read her stuff very regularly. I've read Pride and Prejudice, but I think that might be the only one I have ever read of hers. But it was good fortune, because this book is kind of a spin-off of Pride and Prejudice, but it follows the overlooked sister of Mary Bennett. So Mary Bennett, if you remember Pride and Prejudice, she has a lot of embarrassing moments. She is the girl who is very academic and bookish and who just embarrasses herself in social situations. And I feel like Pride and Prejudice is all about social situations, right? And so you follow Mary Bennett. What I love about this book, though, is for the first little bit, you are kind of following the timeline of Pride and Prejudice. So if you enjoy that book, it revisits a lot of things, but it takes it from Mary's perspective, which I really liked. But then it takes her further. It takes her out of that situation and into her own life. And what does she become? How does she learn to fight for herself? How does she learn to appreciate herself for who she is? And I just thought it was a very heartwarming, sweet book. And I just loved it. And I feel like anybody who's an Austen fan would really, really enjoy this book. So I loved The Other Bennett Sister. Okay, so that gets me through favorites. Those are definitely some standout books. But I have 3 other books / series which are amazing. Like, I just feel like they were really impactful for me this year. In the number 3 spot, I don't even have a copy of this book yet, but I am planning on purchasing it. But it is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So there was a chunk of time in the fall when I was reading this. I read it during a reading vlog. I just mentioned it in a lot of videos. It was just this book that I did not anticipate liking as much as I did. So it is like the classic dark academia book about this group of college students on this elite campus in New England, and they are studying under this classics professor. So kind of a standard dark academia setting. And it is told from the perspective of the main character, Richard, who is the newcomer into this group. And he's just kind of learning about them and finding their relationships very interesting and strange at times, but he's very much drawn to them. He's drawn to their uniqueness and their elitism, because they're very elitist and they think very highly of themselves. And then you learn in the book that at the very first page that one of their members dies, and you spend the rest of the book knowing that. And you know who it is, so it's not a mystery as to who it is. But I love the progression of the book from that point, because you know he is going to die. You have an idea how or who's involved, but that doesn't happen at the end of the book. It happens kind of in the middle, because the aftermath of his death is also very integral and important to the story. And I was there for the whole thing. I thought it was very entertaining. I just found their characters definitely messed up in a lot of ways, but intriguing. And I really wanted to know how it would all conclude. So The Secret History, definitely a favorite for 2022. All right, the next 2, number 1 and number 2, are both series. And this was very hard for me to figure out which order to put these 2 in, because I just loved them both. I love them both so much. But I decided to put in the number 2 spot for favorites this trilogy. So Red Rising by Pierce Brown. You guys, I read this year and I just loved all 3 books. I feel like it was just a very unique world, a very unique story. There's reasons it's so popular, and let me tell you a little bit about at least the first book to see if you would want to read it. But it is a science fiction book, and I really don't read science fiction, but I love this because I just don't feel like it is a super technical, deep science fiction, which is what I associate with science fiction. But this is very approachable. It's about a man named Darrow living on Mars, and so people have colonized Mars, and the people on Mars have set up this hierarchy of people based on color, reds being the lowest. And that is where Darrow is. He is a part of the red hierarchy, and they are involved in being in these mines in terrible conditions to try and mine for a certain substance that will help like terraform the world or help the world like become more green, I guess. And he has been told this his whole life. And then due to some circumstances, he has his eyes open to actually how the world is set up and who is in charge and how they have been lied to, really. And it's from the golds, who are the top of the hierarchy. So the golds and the reds. And so it infuriates Darrow, and he wants to seek revenge, and he wants to do that by infiltrating the golds. And that's what he does. And it spends this whole trilogy working through how is he going to do that? How is he going to accomplish his goal? And what I loved about this book and this whole series is I loved the character of Darrow. I feel like he is a very gray character. He just does some really stupid stuff, and the way he thinks, sometimes you're like, no, that's not going to work. But I love that you're kind of in his head. It's very first person perspective. So you're in his head and you're hearing his thoughts and his emotions and how he regrets so many different things as the plot progresses. But it's still very fascinating how things kind of unfold. And I also just feel like I was attached to the characters. So not just Darrow, but the characters around Darrow, the ones especially that kind of travel throughout all three books. And I feel like so much so that when Pierce Brown doesn't pull punches and he like is just terrible to some of the characters, I just felt it. I felt it very strongly. So I knew that I was very much attached to the characters. I am a character-driven reader, and I felt like these books attached me to the characters enough that at the very end of Morning Star, something happened and I was just so mad. I was so mad I almost didn't finish the last 40 pages because I was just like, I can't take this anymore. I can't take it. But I finished, and I was happy I finished, and it's so good. It's just really entertaining. And so that's number 2 on my favorites for 2022, which leads me into my top favorite, which if you follow my channel and you know it's not Red Rising, then you realize it is probably a Robin Hobb of some sort, which is true because I found Robin Hobb as an author this year, and I love her writing. I love her world. I love just her characters and what is happening in all her stories. And I picked this trilogy in particular, which is the Farseer trilogy, which is her first series in the realm of the Elderlings. And I just loved it. I'm currently reading and almost done with the second trilogy, and I'm also loving that one, but I feel like this is better for me. I really enjoy the character of Fitz. And so this story starts out with Fitz being like 6 years old, and he is dropped off at Buckkeep by his maternal grandfather, and they are told that they are going to deal with him because he is actually the bastard son of the prince-in-waiting, Prince Chivalry, who at that point abdicates the throne and moves to the countryside. And so that just leaves Fitz, this 6-year-old boy at this castle with like no father, but yet he is of the royal line, but not really. He's a bastard. And so he's just in a very unique position. And so he is kind of taken in by the stable master, Burrich, which I just love that relationship to start with. And then as he grows older, the king takes an interest in him and wants to train him up as the royal assassin. And the story goes from there. And it really does go from there into these next books, which was Royal Assassin and Assassin's Quest. Then they're not small books. And like I said, which I think I said, it's all first person perspective from Fitz perspective. And so you're in his head a lot. And I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching as he kind of grew up, as he just did some ridiculous things, as he was put into really hard positions. And again, I feel like Robin Hobb is a author that doesn't pull punches as well. And she has some things happen to her main characters that are just challenging. And you're like, I don't even know if I could handle that or recover from that. But yet the story does go on, and I just loved it. And I'm excited to get to the next series because after the Live Ship Trader series is the third series. I think it's called the Tawny Man series, which brings us back to Fitz, which I'm so excited to get back to Fitz because I love his storylines. Even when it's kind of long and drawn out and he seemingly isn't doing very much. I just really appreciate what's going on and learning everything about his characters. So yes, favorite book of 2022 was the whole trilogy, the Farseer trilogy. But Assassin's Apprentice is the first one. So you guys, 2022 has been an amazing reading year for me. I started to go a new direction of reading more fantasy and really enjoying that, but yet still enjoying a number of really good historical fiction as well as some like murder mysteries. So you guys, I'm so excited to continue on in a lot of these things. And I'm hoping 2023 is an even better year than 2022. But yes, these were my favorites. Let me know down below, have you read them? Do you want to read them? I think you should if you haven't, because I loved all of them. But anyway, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to. And otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, take care.